Hey, Chizzy and Joba, wedding guest here. Thanks for inviting us also generously to your wedding, and thanks for inviting us also to the consummation ceremony afterwards. I have opinions. Can I speak to you, Chizzy? Yes, you. A little tete-a-tete off to the side. Fantastic. Now, I know that you're used to your one bang, thank you, ma'am. But this here, what we have on hand is a situation that requires a bit more subtlety than you're used to, okay? So let's see. The hotel provided you very generously a lot of champagne, right? Crack it open. All those candles, light them. Dim the lights. Do you have music on your phone? I don't know, Spotify, Apple Music, something? Yes, play some music. Let's see, final thing. Did you come with any massage oil? Because that could come in handy. Like I said, a bit more sensitivity, a bit more subtlety, a bit more tact. Right. Beautiful lovers of African cinema, welcome to my channel. My name is Pearl, and on this channel we review and analyze African movies. Today we're reviewing Ch3mistry, a 2024 romantic drama just released right here on YouTube. If you haven't watched it, I'm going to put the link in the description below. Guys, please do me a favor. Could you like this video? It's a little thing, but it really helps the channel. It tells YouTube that you like my videos, and so it pushes them your way. Also, if you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thank you. Ch3mistry. Ch3mistry is written by Chidinma, Igbokwueche, and Lord Josh. It's directed by Adenike, Adebayo, and I understand this is her directorial debut, so congratulations, Adenike. Now for the synopsis of this movie, it says, a newlywed couple looks forward to having sex for the first time. However, things don't go as planned because different issues / problems keep arising. Would they get their happily ever after? We'll circle back to this synopsis later to discuss how it already foreshadows the main problem of this movie, but this is all in the future. Guys, welcome. Let's talk Ch3mistry, starting with Netflix shenanigans. What happened? I want to know what Imagine Media did to Netflix, that this movie was first not released on schedule, because we all heard it was supposed to come out on Netflix, and then it didn't, and it didn't, and it didn't. And then, I mean, even the producer did not know. I think she made a post about saying, yeah, me too, I'm as surprised as you guys, and I was like, that is weird. And then next thing we hear, it's being released on YouTube. So it ends up on YouTube a month after it was initially slated for release. Having watched the movie, all I can say is it was a YouTube movie all along, and it simply found its natural home. So everything worked out as it was supposed to. That's not to say that Netflix and Prime Video are exactly critical or particular or fastidious about the stuff that they put on there. Let's not trip. Now let's talk about this movie. This movie is uncomfortable for me on many levels, but before we get into all of that, let's talk performances. The two main characters are Chizzy and Joba, played by Daniel Effiong and Ebenezer Eno, respectively. Let me talk about Daniel. Yeah, he plays the character of Chizzy, and his acting is, his beard died for this movie, because I think his beard is dyed. Now he's great for this role, although this is like a typical Daniel, but in this particular role he's great casting here, because he naturally has this very sexual energy that literally bounces off the screen. Speaking specifically about this movie, he was fine for this role. All I'm going to say is, maybe I've not seen enough of his movies, but Daniel Effiong in one movie is Daniel Effiong in every movie. He's a fantastic actor. He's very subtle, you know, he plays nuance very well, but it feels to me like if you've seen him once, you've seen all of him, pretty much. That's what I'm going to say. But his performance was great, as expected, as usual. Ebenezer Eno, this is a highly underrated actor. I love her. She plays the character of Joba here, who's the newly minted bride. She's a really great actress. In this particular movie, she plays the blushing bride with a touch of innocent sensuality. She carries this role really great. She's very believable in this role. Daniel Effiong, Ebenezer Eno, together with Bolaji Ogunmola, who plays the character of Adana, that's Chizzy's ex. This trio, I'll just say that they are well cast for what this story is, or at least what what it teases. You guys all know what I mean. We all saw the trailer. That's why we're here. It was steamy. Now, we, the audience, have the omniscience. We see everything. And that's why this casting is so great, because it gives us a lot of fodder for comparisons among the characters. Whether the wife does or does not know, she's in competition with this other woman. And when I say this other woman, in theory, because does that actually manifest in this movie? And then we, of course, as the audience, we consciously or unconsciously pit these women against each other. That's why this cast of these three people is perfect. Speaking of Bolaji Ogunmola in particular, this is another actress that I love. She was one of the highlights for me in Madam Koi Koi. She's fantastic. She's a really good actress. She's also a very subtle performer, and she's hot. Any movie I see her, just get ready, I'm going to say she's hot. I love her. Girl crush. Michael Ejo, I love him. I love his on and off screen personality. Ejo, I hope I'm saying his name right. He plays the character of Efosa here. I always enjoy him, but here his role is very minor. He's just Chizi's friend, and he gives an adequate enough performance. We have Rehia Oronsaye. She plays the receptionist who also begins to seduce Daniel Effiong's character Chizi, and she's adequate for the role. She just did what she was supposed. I was trying to remember where I knew this actress from. I think this was Forbidden. She was very annoying. Not the actress, the character there. So I remember when I saw her, I was like, oh my god, I hate this person. I don't even know why. So that's crazy. Finally, we have Biodun Steven. All I'm going to say here is that I'm really loving this her recent foray into acting. Please, somebody should cast me somewhere. I want to act too. It's interesting. Let's get straight to it. What works? The writing here is subtle in the way that it doesn't draw attention to what it's trying to do. For instance, there's a scene where Chizi tries to evade a question. That scene where they meet Adana for the first time at the pool, and she asks him what he's doing here. I'm willing to put money down that if his wife was not standing right there, that man would have lied with the way he stuttered. It's a subtle thing, but it's there. Now, here's something I want you to remember, that scene is one of the many examples where this movie is telling us something different about its characters than what it ultimately tells us about the character. That's going to make sense down the line. Now, the plot unfolds organically. The movie creates organic micro conflicts that are also really relatable. I've seen many of the comments about how people are able to relate with this movie because the story events are actually like very real life events that feel very familiar. Also, this movie handles or attempts to handle in some instances some important topics, that it picks for its themes, I guess. We have the subject of first time sex. Is it supposed to hurt? Is it painful? Is it not? What are people's different experiences? Whatever. Try to tackle to an extent a sexual disorder, how important sex is in a marriage. And so I'm just going to say that in general, this movie attempts to tackle the complexities of a range of human emotions. Some of them are guilt, insecurity, trauma, fear, inadequacy, and a host of others, but in a nuanced way, leading to characters that more often than not don't feel one-dimensional. The friends here, or I think it's actually a friend and a sister. The voice on the phone, I think, is a sister. They're a healthy balance of good and bad advice, which actually really helps to create more nuance and ambiguity as well as challenge narratives. Because one thing I always say is whenever certain narratives, especially harmful ones, are stated in a movie, someone else comes along and challenges it so that does not remain and stand uncontested. The directing of the actors is fine. Nothing to scream about there, because for the most part, this movie does not really demand very much of these actors. Some, nuanced acting, their subtlety, but really not that, it doesn't stretch them all that much. And also, these are very seasoned actors, almost all of them, and in not a very challenging role. So I'm going to say that not very much directing of the actors was required here. So it was fine. It was adequate. In general, this film is entertaining enough. It creates, if not necessarily a good conflict, at least an intriguing one, and it keeps you wanting to know how it ultimately resolves. Now, if you haven't, would you please like this video? Thank you. And like I asked you before, if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let's get straight to what does not work. This is going to be a lot. Let me start with the fact that we need better voice acting and directing of voice actors in our movies, and that includes phone calls. We had an entire character that featured quite prominently on the phone. We never see them, but those scenes don't really work for me because the voice sounds like most phone calls in our movies usually sound like they're reading off a script, very disembodied. So voice acting, as a general note, is meant to be very physical. It's meant to not feel like you're reading off a script. The soundtrack and the score, I found them to be quite quite distracting. As a matter of fact, none of the technical elements really stand out as good, and I do have criticisms of a few of them, which takes me straight to the cinematography, which I'm just going to say is not notable. In fact, if I have a criticism, I'm just going to say that this movie, it's shot in a single location, right? But the framing of shots does not really help with bettering perspective. For one thing, the choice of lens as well does not help. There are a lot of close-ups, and half shots. It would have given us a better visual experience if they had gone for wide-angled lenses, just to make the space appear, that especially that room appear larger and deeper, and just make the shots more visually interesting. So where atmosphere could have been used to craft the tone and mood of this movie, it fails there. Considering again that this is a single location movie, this movie could have tried to find a more interesting and more dynamic space. There's not much thought given to those artistic elements, so to speak, of scene setting that would have made for a more interesting visual experience. The male gaze in this movie, let me just say, is doing overtime with camera fetishization. I say this all the time, I comment on this all the time. I think it's here to stay. Let's move on to the script, and I'm going to issue a warning here. I'm not pulling any language punches, so to speak. So let me just announce to you that this review is PG, keep your kids away. I'd like to say straight away that this movie is happening for only one reason. This entire movie is happening because a man does not know about foreplay. A man does not realize that this woman that he just married, especially somebody as completely sexually inexperienced as her, there's a process, and that's why this movie is happening, and all the rest is extra. Let's get to the characters. Chizzy, the male lead, he's done no favors. From the very beginning, in what appears unintentional ways, he's shown to be a player, and this is very subtle, but it's there, and you can tell that this is done unintentionally. The movie is trying to tell you that he's not. He's a good guy. He's this guy who has been celibate for a year and a half, but then it's not believable. So what this then does is that it makes the character feel completely misaligned with the story that insists that he's been celibate for a year and a half. Then it continues to wreck his character by having him be selfish, not understand the needs of this woman he's married, display a lack of sensitivity, a lack of imagination, and eventually a lack of discretion. Let's talk about Joba, the female lead. This woman comes into this marriage with an unhealthy idea of her function as a wife, just steeped in traditionalism, which is not a bad thing except when it's unhealthy. And she's allowed to complete her character arc with this same mindset intact. That's where it becomes problematic. So she feels and acts like she owes this man sex. She also believes that she has a biological imperative to make babies, and that's not a problem in general, but that she has to begin fulfilling like this right from the honeymoon, because it comes up when she talks about what they're supposed to be doing during the honeymoon. She says making babies. Unless she means that facetiously, it doesn't make sense, right? But I'm not going to waste time on that. So my big problem here with all of this is that none of these ideas are dispelled effectively. I always say this, that you can tell whatever story you want to tell, you can do whatever you want to do with a story or the characters, but how you conclude ultimately is what tells me your value statement, and the value statement of this movie ultimately is uncomfortable for me. At the end, not only does this movie have her set up her own seduction and the conditions under which this sex eventually happens, it also has her apologize and assume all the responsibility for everything that has happened. And even then, even at that point at the end, this man still falls short. When I tell you that when that man reached for that lube again, I was ready to fight or cry. So this female protagonist, she's unsafe. She feels unsafe in this relationship. And again, we're going to break these things down, but what is egregious here is that this movie does not recognize this, and so she's not taken care of at all in this story, except with lip service, right? But not with any actions is this female character taken care of, this female protagonist, throughout this movie. Let's talk about the story. The structure and the plot, they constantly miss the mark in small but frequent ways that eventually form a picture of not very competent writing, I'm afraid to say, but that also promotes harmful narratives. And that's why whenever I get mad about a movie, it's not so much about, oh, the writing is not great, that's fine, but once the narratives that are being sort of propounded feel harmful, that's when I start to get it starts to feel personal. In the scene where this man Chizzy and his friend Efosa moan and bemoan about her Joba supposedly having vaginismus, only for them, after spending some time talking about this and crying about it, that's when they whip out the phone and decide to Google what it means. I'm like, how are you crying and upset about something that you don't even know what it means or what it is, you know. So that was very wonky structure, and there are a few instances here and there. The conflict of this movie is false. False conflict, by the way, is one of the more annoying kinds of conflicts that a writer can inflict on an audience. This kind of conflict, and is popular in romantic dramas, it rests entirely on things that are easily resolved with probably just conversation. But this conversation purposely does not happen, because once it happens and the characters reach an understanding, the story is essentially over. And I hate false conflicts so much. So ultimately, there's really no conflict in this movie. Also, false advertising. And this is from the trailer to even the marketing and promotional materials. Here's a quote I picked up on Bella Naija. It says, "It's a story about love, lust, and the other woman." And I'm asking, is it? Because we all know that none of these things really features prominently as a theme in this movie. Maybe love of some sort, but lust, no, it doesn't actually come to fruition. That was just a tease to get people to come see the movie, as well as the subject of the other woman. And you know, this movie just really relies on creating intrigue, but it's actually unable to commit to any of the storylines it teases, because it's as equally committed to promoting this male protagonist as a good man. So as a result of that, it really doesn't commit to the conflicts that it could have gone into to make this movie enjoyable. The dialogue in this movie is often on the nose. Now, this movie fails at creating a credible subplot, again, because it would not commit to a storyline that has real potential, which is the storyline with the ex. And instead, it decides to waste time with an uninteresting story that the audience can see from a mile away, that does not constitute an actual threat. It's just a distraction. Another thing that this movie does or does not do, as the case may be, is recognize a crucial role of one of its characters. The ex, Adana, she could and should have been used as a resource for Chizzy to confront his selfishness and lack of attentiveness, as somebody who has history with him and is therefore positioned to tell him the truth about himself, leading to change. They come close, but they don't quite land it. This movie is also inconsistent in its characters' thoughts and emotions. For one thing, Joba starts out blaming herself, but then when Chizzy blames her, she turns the blame on him. And so I'm like, does she or does she not have self-awareness? You know, but then later, again, she assumes all the blame at the end. And it's kind of like this for me with that character. And then Chizzy again, he's not portrayed as oh my god, he's not portrayed as trustworthy. I said this already. And so when he says that sex is not important to him, we all know that he's lying. So this character is just not believable on any level, and I don't know if you all agree with me and felt the same way. I'd really like to hear your thoughts about this point in the comments. Now, I said that I would refer back to the synopsis, which highlights one fundamental problem of this film. This movie does not have one concrete conflict, and instead it relies on different issues, and that's exactly, this is quoting from the synopsis, different issues / problems keep arising. So it doesn't create a consistent conflict that runs a through line through the story and is like the spine. Instead, it keeps relying on little issues here and there. So it leads to just this fragmented narrative instead of one comprehensive story with a central conflict that continues to escalate. Here are some of these micro conflicts that keep popping up. We have the failure to launch, we have the false alarm vaginismus. Then we have the period, attending period cramps and all the other things. We have temptations from the receptionist. We have temptations from the ex. We have lies about his history with the ex. And then we have the ultimate big blow up. I don't even know if there are probably several others. I don't know. And so there's not one conflict that you can hold on to, as the conflict of this movie. And that's a major problem here. Now, so far, I've been talking broad strokes, talking over your head, sort of. Anyway, let's discuss the points I've raised, but this time with specifics. Okay, starting with the couple's dynamic. Now, I've said that he's selfish, he's self-centered, that's Chizzy, and he's without imagination. Let's break that down. From the very beginning, first night, wedding night, when Joba is in the bathroom, Chizzy doesn't think to use the chance to set the mood. You've married a woman who is completely, untouched. You couldn't think, and that's why I also said a failure of imagination. You couldn't think to, dim the lights, play music, pour some some wine. The hotel kept generously supplying you with champagne and sending you to your room with even more wine. Light some of those candles, I don't know, a massage, something, because this is not, I mean, first of all, a wedding night should be special, you know, but more so for somebody who has never had sex before, you know. But, you know, it's fine that nothing happens because, yeah, most times people don't have sex on their wedding night. I don't know what it is if you've never had sex before, but most people have had sex. So wedding night is just another night. Let's just go to sleep. You know, everybody's tired. So that makes sense. That tracks. That's completely believable. But then the next morning, what happens? This man, I don't think he spent 30 minutes. I don't think he spends 30 seconds trying to get her ready before he goes for it. So of course what happened, right? Okay. So it doesn't work out, and then that's fine, you know, failure to launch, like I said, it's okay. But then the way his whole body language changes, he pouts, she blames herself. That's when I start realizing that this movie is going to upset me and probably trigger me because, and let me just say this PSA, ladies, any situation that makes you feel like you failed if you don't put out sexually is inherently an unsafe situation for you. I'm just gonna say that and leave that there. Now we meet the ex at the pool, you know, and next thing, period begins, right? After the whole misunderstanding about vaginismus, period begins. So at that point, when I realize it's 9 p.m., I'm asking myself, where did the entire day go? So throughout the day one of married life, they had breakfast, they went to the pool, and then he never tries again. You know, like, so what that communicates to me unintentionally is this is a man who likes it easy. If it's constituting a nuisance, pretty much that was his vibe, then he's not even going to try, right? And this theme of selfishness continues to play throughout this movie. I'll give you a few more examples. And so, you know, he does nothing to help get her there. And eventually at the end of the movie, when this scene setting does happen, the mood lighting, the everything that I said, it's she who initiates all of that, not him. So from start to finish, this man actually never does anything that helps bring her to this place of comfortability. She literally stages her own seduction. When this man reached for that lube again at the end of the movie, he did in the beginning because when bang, thank you ma'am, this is a man that is not going to try. This is important because this is the entire point of this movie, sex and getting a woman ready for sex. That's why gay people laugh at us straight people, because they're always like, you people don't know how to have sex. You know, if it's not penetration, that's it. That's the whole point of it. So anyway, he reaches for the lube and I'm like, one thing that this man will do is go for penetration straight up. He and foreplay have made a pact to stay far away from each other. The way I felt frustrated. Let's carry on. Then when I said that he also lacks imagination, so she's on her period, and when this man has an opportunity to slow down, try to suggest other things, when he was whispering to her, I was excited to see what he was going to suggest. You know, I was thinking, I don't know what I thought would happen, but what does this man suggest? Period sex. Because this man is about penetration. That's it. He's about the act, the sex act. And then later, he talks to his friend Efosa and says there's been some hand action. So he delivers this as exposition, but this is too critical to the story because we are following this journey of seduction or the lack of it as the case may be. So how do we get to this place of hand action? Have they been doing that before? Because some people are virgins, like they're doing everything but. So I don't know if that's been part of their sexual, non-sexual repertoire. You know, I have no idea. It's a big thing, but it happens off screen and we get it as exposition, and I don't know why. I don't know why he mentions the receptionist to his friend. It suggests that he's been thinking about this. Why? And this is what I mean when I say that this movie makes unwitting statements about this male protagonist.
So I stumbled across a YouTube page. I really think we should watch it together. You mean help us figure out?
Ma'am, no. No, there's nothing to figure out. This man just needs to actually make love to you. Like, that's it. That's it. He hasn't actually tried. So all this, we could go to therapy, we could do this, we could do that. And he's sitting there and whatever the hell he's saying, because I started to tune him out. All that needs to happen is for this man to actually make love to you, not try to penetrate you. This movie is tiresome, okay? I'm sorry. So it feels to me like once he did whatever he did, by setting up that room, candles that are never lit until she lights them herself, wine that is never really like poured and, to relax her, the lighting and all the things until she sets the mood. All this man did was just supply those things and give her that stupid teddy. If I never see that teddy in my life again, it won't be too soon. Let's carry on. So also her talking of making babies, I've noted that already, but also beyond just her mentioning that casually, like I said, that could have been said facetiously, but what is all this talk about his mom already expecting a grandchild and already talking about fertility concoction? I'm so confused about that. Like, this is literally day 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 of a marriage. Now, about the ex, I mentioned that this movie failed to recognize the role that she was supposed to play that would have made her a pivotal character.
Okay, so if he was ready to relocate, you would have said yes?
At the time, yes.
So the correct answer there is no, and for 2 reasons. One, I've already said that her role in this movie was actually to be the voice of reason because she has history with him. She is the one who knows him well enough to be able to give him peer review, feedback, and say, you're somebody who only takes care of your own needs. Yes, the sex was good between us because, I'm also experienced, but she could have been used effectively to give him something to think about and lead to a change of attitude, but that was wasted. So here also in this conversation, the reason I said the correct answer was no there is that at this point Joba is so broken down that she has kind of lost her self-confidence. What this scene is supposed to do is nudging her back to a feeling of security. So how do you then throw this huge insecurity cog in the wheel of that progress? Let me give you my own personal story because I have history that is actually exactly this story with this guy and the ex. Before I met my husband, the person I was dating, this is way back in 2013, he had an ex. He had an ex, and throughout the relationship I was uncomfortable with their communication. Why? Because they broke up for the same reason these people broke up. So throughout that relationship, with regards to that particular ex, I never felt safe. And then eventually she came to Nigeria to do her NYC, and then I found out that she had visited my boyfriend. And so I said, oh, so you got to see her, what happened? And he was like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I also want to continue being in it, because basically this is somebody who haunts you, because these people, there was nothing wrong with their relationship except that they just disagreed on where to live. So how do you then tell the wife that she would have said yes to the marriage if they had agreed on where to live, and this is supposed to make her feel any more secure? That makes no sense. And yet the movie still forced things to where the wife comes back and announces that this conversation made her feel more secure. No, ma'am, it won't, it doesn't, it can't, it shouldn't. They didn't actually recognize the role of this character. They only brought her into this story for cheap drama. Another point, when the blowout happens and the wife starts ranting about the fact that they have history, that they dated, I was wondering if they forgot that they told her she knows that they dated. The only new information here is that the relationship was serious enough to where he proposed marriage. And yet in this blow up, she's vocalizing that she didn't even know that they had history at all. The denouement also annoyed me because he shows her, these tickets to the Maldives. That should have been a sweet gesture, but if this movie is trying to make him sensitive, can I suggest to you that this would have been more powerful if he had shown her those tickets when the sex had not happened, when she was still feeling very down on herself. And so that would have been a statement that no, nothing is lost, you're not any less valuable to me, because she was down on herself to the extent that she's even questioning whether or not the marriage can continue, if she can perform or not. Do you realize how harmful that is for people to go into relationships thinking that they owe somebody sex, and that if they cannot perform, they don't have value? Their value is their inherent value is in what they can provide sexually, and then of course eventually domestically and in all other ways. These things are important. I'm not saying that they are not, but when you're trying to tell a romantic story, a love story, and you pin people's value to all the things that they can provide, especially for a woman, specifically sexually and domestically, that's a harmful narrative. narrative that makes me so uncomfortable. Now, at this point, when he saves these tickets and then the surprise, and then he's showing her after they've had sex, I know I'm a very cynical person sometimes, but it felt icky. It made me feel almost like she's being rewarded for finally putting out. I also noted that this movie is sexist, but just has a complete lack of awareness of this, where Efosa confronts Adana, and that's not just sexist, but also insulting. He's telling her, I know that look, whatever, he's married now, he really, really loves his wife. It's your friend who is gagging for her, okay? We all watched together when this man had a whole sexual fantasy of this woman. And you know what's funny? Nothing would have been lost if she was the one who had the fantasy, because we're trying to maintain this image of him as sexually invaluable, right? So nothing would have been lost if she was the one who had that fantasy and he's staring at her like literally you could have reversed who did what in that scene and it would still have worked and still have given us that heavy scene that we wanted to sell the trailer for this movie. We would have gotten it, except that it should never have been him. But we have, and not just did this happen, but the context within which it happened. Literally, his wife is upstairs bent over with period cramps and he's down here. So can I put it to you that if that woman had actually gone ahead and invited him into that room, I vote that he would have. So the vibe of this character was completely off. I did not believe, I think I've probably already said this, that he's been celibate for this year and half of this engagement. Man, the receptionist was a non-event. She's not spec. This is a man that would go with spec. So yeah, that was sexist, that whole friend and insulting. Because if anything, she's the one that has kept everything very above board throughout. And then another instance again is the first time these two men speak of Adana. Efosa says Adana of 20 hours marathon sex or whatever it is that he said. So that's the image that the movie gives us of her, that their relationship was sexual, not just sexual, but sexual almost in a judgmental way, as a woman who puts out, essentially. But then later we find out that their relationship was so much more than that. This is a woman that he came close to marrying. How is your friend comfortable with? All right. Speaking of Efosa again, another role that he could have played, again, a misuse of secondary characters. Efosa had another small role here. The opportunity was given to us in that conversation when he expressed surprise or disbelief or whatever it is that Chizzy has never disvirgined the girl. If this movie was aware of his incompetence and his part in all of the things that had happened and therefore his blame, then this was a perfect opportunity for him to take responsibility, citing his lack of experience in that department. But how can he do that if the movie does not think that he played any role in it? The blame is all on the woman. She's the one who is inadequate. She's the one who, is unable to spread her legs on day one and get going. He's the victim here. Finally, the title of this movie, it says nothing. I don't know what is chemistry here. Again, this is more false advertising, false marketing. So I'm just going to say that this movie really fails to deliver on several of its promises. In conclusion, I don't think that this movie is the right vehicle to try to tackle the subject of vaginismus. Important subject, but it requires a simpler, less complicated plot without all of these conflicts flaring up here and there and confusion. A more thoughtful story would serve that subject better. Here, it's merely a distraction. The length of time in which this plot unfolds invalidates the whole problem statement of this movie, because it's only maybe 1 week tops that this whole movie. So failure to have sex and half of that time or more than half of that time is somebody having period, it's a non-event. The fact that that's a problem is actually an indictment of society as a whole. The fact that your wife cannot immediately give you sex, it underlines again that idea that this is something that is owed, to the extent that when it doesn't happen on day one, it's a crisis enough to be an entire conflict of a movie. Shame on us. This movie fails to recognize the true character of its characters, and especially the male lead. He learns nothing because the writers themselves do not acknowledge his carelessness and lack of sensitivity. Having her apologize at the end is absolutely maddening. Her words at the end of this movie feel like coping. All these her, quoting the ex and saying, she, told me how you love me so much. Is his ex that is going to be the one to consolidate to you that your husband loves you. All right, auntie, cope all you want. If that works for you, like, listen, ladies, sisters, don't ignore your internal alarm. Like, this movie creates false drama in an effort to protect the integrity of its characters and ultimately leaves the audience feeling cheated. But as I said, it's entertaining enough. Now, on this channel, we usually give grace, we do, for first-time directors. All I'm going to say here about that is that I don't really have a problem with the directing. Watch this movie if you enjoy these actors and if you don't care all that much about emotional truth of stories. This movie is also dense with sexual suggestiveness and innuendo. If you like that sort of thing, absolutely, it's enjoyable. All of that said, me personally, I did enjoy this movie when I stopped being so finicky, and so you too can. There was enough to hold me to stay to continue watching the movie, and sometimes that's all the filmmaker asks of you. All right, guys, that's it for Chemistry. Thank you for being here. If you stay through this review to the end with me, I appreciate you. Please subscribe, if you haven't, but also it will mean a lot to me if you share this on your social media. Please help me help my channel grow, and one of the fastest ways is to share this to your groups, your social media, your family, your friends. Please invite them to subscribe to my channel. I could really use the help, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to film a short version to this review. I don't have a script for it. This movie is going to be incredibly difficult to summarize, but it's all worth it because I get to dress up. I swear, my reward for all these reviews that stress me out are that I have the opportunity to really dress up because I don't go out much. Okay, all right, guys, you have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle. Thank you.